And we're now joined by Chris Bishop, head of program here at CNBC Africa, to just guide us through the impact she has had on the continent, let alone South Africa. Chris, definitely a pleasure speaking to you. Of course, the number one thing we must rule out is that the impact she has had goes way beyond the people that she was tied to. Of course, everyone mentions her as the former wife to Nelson Mandela, but she held Africa and South Africa on her shoulders way more than any other person we can actually mention in the South African context. Help us wrap our minds around this.
Well, I mean, they call her the mother of the nation. That's how she's been celebrated today. One thing, I mean, I've known Winnie Mandela for many years, and I interviewed her quite a few times. I saw her just a few months ago at the ANC elective conference here in Johannesburg. And the one thing you could always say about that lady is that she had power. She had power. Whenever she walked down the street, you could see people would almost be wanting to get out of her way. You know, she was certainly somebody who was full of passion, full of power. When you read about her sometimes tortuous life, and the fact she spent 491 days in solitary confinement, most of it lying face down naked on a concrete cold floor, being beaten and tortured along the way, how anybody can survive that and still be mentally and physically intact is a miracle to me. And I think that it's something that shaped her whole life. I think it gave her that flinty steel, it gave her that resolve, and it gave her that kind of edge that she always had, and which she used in many causes in trying to liberate the people of this continent.
Right, Chris, the EFF issued a statement on the passing, and they said that she was the first black female president South Africa was deprived of. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that statement. They're saying she should have been the first woman president of South Africa, something we're still waiting for, which I think is still going to be a few years away yet. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to visualize sometimes how people are going to be when they end up in power. It's always quite a difficult one. I mean, I've known scores of people across this continent before they were in power and then after they were in power. Sometimes they can be two different people, and the second person is not always the person that you'd hoped would emerge. Let me put it that way. I don't know. I mean, I think that obviously she had a lot of support. She had a lot of roots in the movement. She had sometimes a questionable past in some places. So I don't know. I mean, I think that the power and energy she had, surely I think she could have brought something to the job.
Well, Chris, that's very interesting, I'm sorry. But speaking of President, we do understand that Winnie he's the ex-wife to Nelson Mandela, was the first black president of South Africa. Now, one might ask themselves a question. For a lady like her who was on the forefront to fight against apartheid in South Africa, and the legacy that she has lived to create, her passing today, what kind of a void does it leave for women on the continent?
Well, I think that there are many, many women across the continent who are coming to the fore. I think she inspired a lot of people, certainly, and we're seeing that now with a great outpouring amongst many people, especially women in power in the continent, who are saying how she inspired them in the past. I think her legacy will go on. I think more and more women across this continent are going to come forward, and I think that her legacy, I think that's what it is. And to be honest with you, having known her in the past, I think that's the sort of thing that she would have been very appreciative of, and I think that it's how the continent really should remember her, with that idea of hope and hope for the future.
Now, well, that is very interesting, but it's not a thing that we've seen with a lot of women on the continent. Maybe it's picking up now, seeing women involved with politics, and quite a conversation there. But now let's look on the reaction this maybe has caused to, say, businesses. As far as CNBC goes, we talk business news day in, day out. So just wrap our minds around this. Winnie's passing, what effect has it had on businesses in South Africa, and when should we see maybe a turnaround, if any?
Well, I don't know whether it's going to have any direct effect on business. Certainly there's going to be a state funeral on Saturday, April the 14th, in their hometown in the Eastern Cape. I can't really see it having much effect on business, but overall the country is in a new phase in the fact that new leadership from Cyril Ramaphosa this Friday, as you know, the former president Jacob Zuma is expected to go before a court as part of a trial on charges of fraud, corruption and money laundering, which, as you know, there's not that many countries in Africa that can say they put a former president on trial in their own country. I mean, I think there's a tremendous thing at the moment, and I think that overall, given her values, Winnie Mandela, I think that she would have wanted that kind of rigorous approach to the people in power. I think she would have approved of it. And certainly I do know from people who are close to her that in the latter years of President Zuma's rule in this country, she was pretty much displeased on how the country was going. So I think that her memory can only add to the good feeling there is at the moment in South Africa that things may turn around and things, the economy may be getting a lot better in the future.
Right, Chris, it's George again. Now, I visited South Africa at the time, and I was pretty surprised. Around the time I visited, there was MTN Zikela, I think, was Akela. I'm not sure I'm mentioning it right. But they were listing, and they said that this was MTN, but for the minority or for the black consumers. And this clearly shows that there is some elements of segregation. Even though we work on this emancipation, there's some elements that have still been instilled in society as the new normal. So in an area where we want to see total emancipation, what will this mean?
Yes, well, I think it's something that I've been studying politics in this country for about 20 years. I think that it's something that's going to come out over time. It's going to take generations for a lot of the sort of segregation and the mindset of the past to be wiped away. It's something that I think that only time can heal. I think it's something that's very difficult to legislate for. Clearly, and I don't know. I mean, sometimes when I see my children at school and they're there with playing around with you know, a mix of races and people of all creeds and colours, you know, it gives me hope for the future. Certainly, when I see people socialising together in this country, regardless of creed or colour, it gives me a lot of hope. But certainly, this society, like a lot of societies around the world, and remember everybody's got their problems, certainly has a long way to go, I think, in that. And I think it's going to take generations, but it will happen and it'll be for the better when it does.